Tracy Hurst had an abusive childhood, which led her into the Gothic culture of dark music and anarchy. Depression overtook and brought her to a point of suicide, but now she lives a life of hope, and she's here to tell us about her journey. Tracy, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You did indeed have an abusive childhood, didn't you?
I sure did. My testimony really begins before the age of 1. My parents divorced. My dad quickly remarried and started his new family, had 2 children. My mom remarried and remarried and remarried.
No.
And what I understand now is she lost her father at the age of 9, and so she was trying to fill the hole in her soul with men. And thank the Lord, she now has that filled with Jesus, but at the time she was looking for love.
Sure.
And unfortunately she chose not so wonderful of men. I remember when she began to date my second stepfather, and I knew there was just something not right with him. He wowed her, and they married very quickly, and she's told me since their marriage that as soon as they entered their honeymoon, changed night and day. And the abuse began very slowly, very subtly. He was very abusive with his words and very controlling. And then I'll never forget when the abuse began with me. I was in 5th grade, could not figure out a math problem, and math is still not my strong suit. And he grabbed me by the hair and lifted me off of the ground, shouting, "You are so stupid." And you know, just that first incident, it began to increase over the years.
This guy has some anger issues.
Definitely, and toward women in particular. Well, the abuse got so bad that my mom and I were in fear for our life. I had to do things just right or I was in trouble. And it reached the point where we began to fear for our lives. And I remember one cold night, it was close to Christmas, my mom nudged me about 2 a.m. and told me of an elaborate plan that we were going to leave him and run for our lives. And so I packed my bag, and as only 8th grader can, I somehow went back to sleep. And I woke up the next morning and I thought, what a wild dream. So I went, took my shower, and went to my closet to pick out my clothes, and there sat the bag packed. And I knew that this was real. We walked out the plan, had breakfast. She opened up the garage door as she always does. And as she's saying, "Have a great day, Tracy," we put the car in neutral and we run for our lives. We go to a local abuse shelter. And the women there, by the way, were awesome. They shared their sheets, and I saw kids and women just, you would never know. You would never know that they were struggling. And a few days later, we decided to go home to Illinois for Christmas. And somehow our abuser found us. We went to the bank to grab some money out of an account, and he saw us pulling out. A high-speed chase began.
Wow.
And he hit us off the road, and my side hit a light pole. My little brother is alive today, I believe, because I shielded him with my body. Glass everywhere. I had a tick in my eye, just the uncontrollable movement because of the stress. And I sat that Christmas Eve looking at my family and everyone around me, thinking everyone's having fun but me. And I believe it was at that time that I began to sink into depression. Things got worse. I went home. I began to hang out with the wrong crowd.
Is that how you got into the Gothic lifestyle?
Yes.
What was appealing about it for you?
I had been hurt and wounded by authority figures. And I thought, if I can look scary and go ahead and know that people are going to reject me, maybe then I wouldn't be abused.
The rejection is a tool for you.
Yeah, I didn't know consciously that's what I was doing, but inside somehow I had this plan. The people pleasing and trying to perform didn't work, and I thought, well, let's try rebellion. Well, as you can only imagine, it led me down the wrong road. Began to listen to dark music, as you stated. I mean, I wrote anarchy signs on my clothing, all over my arms. I drew dark pictures of cutting my wrist. It was very, very dark.
Did you get into cutting and any of those things as well?
I was on the borderline. I was on the borderline of even dabbling in witchcraft. I was going nowhere.
And how old were you when this change started to take place?
That occurred when I was a freshman in high school.
Okay.
And it reached the point where my mom realized I can't help her. So she called my father many states away and
said, "Your birth father."
"Yes, you've got to come get her." Well, they had 2 children. They were very cautious about bringing me, a troubled teen, and once you you know, I wish y'all could see how I looked. It's amazing, the dark, dark clothing, dark makeup. And I looked like Halloween every day, pretty much. And when I told my dad, if you don't come get me, I'm taking my life, I'm so glad that they came and got me. And he became a Christian. He made me go to church.
So before you had gone to live with him, he had remarried, had 2 children,
Yes.
and become a man of faith.
Yes.
Okay.
And so he had prayed for me throughout the years, and he made me go to church. Every time the doors open, I had to be there.
Good place to be.
Had you had much contact with your birth father in those years?
In and out. You know, when we lived in the same state, I did visitation. We would go back and forth between the weekends, but then we moved several states away. So I would see him maybe once or twice a year, and there were a few years that really we talked on the phone. So going to live with him was a huge step, but I knew I was miserable. My mom knew I was miserable, and it was the only way to go.
And you're still a freshman at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
So I moved to Illinois, and the youth group loved me. I still think the youth pastor must have told them before I came, hey, listen, we have a Gothic teen coming, because they looked past my exterior and they loved me for who I was. And I saw something in these teens that I didn't have. They had peace, they had joy, they had hope. And the night that I decided I want what they have, it was a student-led chapel, and I knelt down, a Gothic, depressed, suicide teenager, and I stood up, and the desire to die left literally that very night.
Really?
Yes. I had a lot more to work through, trust me, but I wanted to live, and my new purpose in life was for the light of Jesus Christ. And ever since then, that's been my journey, is to tell everyone about the goodness of God. And from that point, I just became a leader for Christ.
You became pretty radical about your faith.
Very radical. I went from this Gothic, suicidal, rebellious teen to beginning a high school Bible study on the campus. I only knew John 3:16, but you know, at the time, that's where we started.
Let's start with that.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing, is my life, when I gave it to Christ, my mom accepted Jesus as her Savior.
Really?
Yes. When you see that, my dad says often, you are a walking miracle. You shouldn't be alive, but you are. And when you look back to where I've come from and what God is doing through my life and in my life, He gets all the glory. He gets all the glory.
What were some of the issues, though, that the Lord had to work through in your life? Because there's an instantaneous decision and work in your life from the Lord. But then there's also a walking out process of Him constantly cleaning and ridding us of those things that have contributed to those attitudes. What was that process like for you? What did the Lord reveal to you?
Well, forgiveness was a huge key. Forgiving, asking for forgiveness from my mom, forgiving my abusers. And one of the things, I graduated from Asbury College with a psychology degree, and they required, and I wish every school did this, that you go to 3 sessions of counseling. Well, those 3 sessions ended up being 2 years. God used a Christian counselor, which I was later to become, to help me work through my past pain. And I hid my testimony. I was very ashamed of what had happened and transpired in my life. And so I became this new Tracy. And what I had a dream one night, and what my counselor helped me see, was that I needed to embrace my testimony. The old Tracy is why the new Tracy is here. And I had a dream that the new Tracy met the old one. So, you know, what I look like now met the Gothic. And we just looked at each other. And she said, you have to embrace who you were, because that's made you who you are. And she said, you've got to begin to share your story. So I very slowly, in fear of rejection, began to share my story. And what's amazing now is it's the polar opposite. I tell everyone I can about what God has done. The first time I gave my testimony on stage, people that I knew for years said, I had no idea. I had no idea. And that's why I'm so thankful to be here today, because it really is for God's glory and what He's done.
You're not just thankful to be here today, you're thankful to be here today. Yeah.
Yes. I feel like next to the definition of blessed, it should say Tracy Hurst. I really, really believe that. And I began a Christian counseling practice, of course, with troubled teens, right? With women.
Because you minister out of what you've experienced and what you've been delivered from.
Yes, my mess became my greatest message.